welcome to another brand new episode of Dingers and Stingers, the podcast that knows that the only thing hotter than Miami in the summer is the seat of Dolphins head coach Mike McDaniel. Welcome to this week's episode. We are talking about the AFC East and our continuation of our 2025 division previews. I'm Dallas, that's Matt, and that's Drew. And we're going to get into it with the AFC East here. A very interesting division from the perspective of lots of question marks here to talk about. So I wanted to start just, with general thoughts on the AFC East. What do you guys think about this division, just generally speaking? What teams, what stands out to you about these teams in general going into the year? And then we'll get into specifics about, where we've been, where we're going, stuff like that. But first, general thoughts on the AFC East. What does this division make you guys feel?
I'm bored.
For most of my life, or for most of our lives, it was the Patriots ran this division and the other teams were pretty much garbage. And now it kind of seems that way, except instead of being the Patriots division, it's the Bills division. So the last few years, I know the Dolphins have snuck into the playoffs and things like that, but it kind of feels it's a one team runs it type of division, and it kind of has been our whole life.
Yeah, definitely the case right now, and we'll get into more of that as we get deeper into our specifics here. So let's start with, where we've been. So last year with this division, here's how it shook out. So the 2024 division standings went as follows. The Buffalo Bills won the division and were the only team in the division that made the playoffs. They had a record of 13-4, and they lost in the AFC Championship to the Kansas City Chiefs, which has happened before and may happen again. Who's to say? But then in second place, quite a bit behind them are the Miami Dolphins. They won 8 games and lost 9. Behind them is the New York Jets. 5-12 was their record. And behind them, if you can even believe that someone is behind a record of 5-12, it was the New England Patriots with a record of 4-13. So that is where this division ended up last year. And so let's talk about where we're going with this division and get into our team-by-team breakdown of this division for this offseason and the season to come. So we're going to start, as we always do, we're going to go in finishing order. So we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills right here up top. So if you watched our episode where we talked about the AFC North, we could really kind of copy and paste everything that we said about the Ravens in that episode and say it about the Bills in this episode. This is a team that's firmly in their competitive window, although a bit less so than the Ravens, in my opinion, admittedly. They locked up Josh Allen long-term, that he will be their quarterback for years to come here. But the offseason's second priority was to improve their depth at key positions, especially at wide receiver. So that was their main weakness last season. The lack of superstar talent at that position is what kept the lid on this offense in crucial situations, especially when it came to the playoff time. So now that we know what they might have needed, let's talk about what they got and start with our offseason recap for the Bills. Talk about their notable additions and maybe even some people they might have lost.
Yeah, so notable additions. They added wide receiver Josh Palmer, defensive end Michael Hoyt, continuing with the Steel X-Rams trend, defensive end Joey Bosa, and then defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi. Those were kind of like the main notable additions. And then guys they lost, Von Miller and Mac Hollins. So it seems like they pretty much tried to just replace what they lost. They lose Mac Hollins, they bring in a Josh Palmer. They lose Von Miller, they bring in a bunch of defensive line, just like talent and players. So not the flashiest offseason by any means, but a team that didn't really need to get flashy.
Yeah, a team that was more or less, as good as they can be with room for improvement in a couple of key areas, right? So I want to talk about this wide receiving group. So the addition of Josh Palmer, obviously not necessarily a splash acquisition here. Not at that position, certainly. He'll come in and maybe be the three guy, you think? And so let's talk about that wide receiving group for a little while. Do you think Josh Allen has what he needs at this point to succeed? Is he being set up well as far as who's catching the ball from him, do you think?
I think so. I think so. What they have is interesting to me because I actually think it's mostly built around the idea that come playoffs and come kind of end of season, they're going to be playing in these cold games. They're going to be playing in a lot of, weather, and they don't have like the super shifty, fast, like burner type of receivers. They got these big dudes. They play with two tight ends. You think about Keon Coleman is just a contested ball kind of guy. And I think their idea of like what works is they're planning on getting to the end, getting to the playoffs. And when push comes to shove, if they've got, some game that's being played at 6 degrees or some snow game, they're probably gonna go to the run game and be able to just have these like big bodies catching the ball rather than burning guys for 300 yards. I think they're building their team to try and play like traditional playoff football, weirdly, where the AFC has kind of shown in recent years like a different style of how to succeed in playoffs. Um, but I like who they have. It's not the best group by any means of pass catchers, but they've got two solid tight ends in my opinion. James Cook is a solid receiver out of the backfield. Keon Coleman solid. I like Josh Palmer. So they've got pieces for sure.
Yeah, I think they have plenty for me to feel totally fine about their division chances, their playoff chances. Um, Josh Allen, he's our reigning MVP, so and he didn't lose that much. He just swapped out Mac Hollins for Josh Palmer. Um, so I think it'll be fine. I think things will work the way they should. Now, I would prefer if he did have a true number one like he did when he had Stefon Diggs. Um, but those are hard to get. And I think, you got some guys here that have shown the ability to make plays. So I think it's fine. But I think that's one of the reasons why I can't put them as like top tier contender. But they are certainly good enough, and I think Josh Allen is a good enough quarterback to be, you know, a contender light.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you hit on one of the things that I hoped would come up, which is the fact that they outside of their wide receivers, they have a really good pass catching running back, and they have some nice tight ends to work with as well. So yes, outside of those wide receivers, they have some other targets that they're familiar with hitting. Although, as I am speaking to two people who I'm in a fantasy league with, James Cook doesn't matter to me, and you shouldn't care about him either. So let's talk about our X factors for the Bills this year. And for X factors today on our episode, we'll start with Drew and then go to Matt. So let's start with X factors for the Bills, and let's see what we got for them.
Starting with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. Um, yeah, so my X factor for the Bills, I didn't go with anyone on their team. In fact, I went with an entirely different team, and the team I went with is the Kansas City Chiefs are the X factor for the Bills. And now, obviously, the season can play out a ton of different ways. You never know. But 4 of the last 5 seasons the Bills season has ended losing in the playoffs to Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. That is the monkey on their back. They have not been able to shake it, despite some decent regular season success against the Chiefs. They cannot beat them come playoff time, and that was true last year, and like I said, 4 of the last 5 years. So that the Bills will make the playoffs unless catastrophic injuries happen or something. The Bills will be a playoff team. They'll probably win this division. They'll probably be one of the top 3 records in the AFC. Um, so that in my head is already taken care of. So then you get to the playoffs. They beat the Broncos last year. They beat a good Ravens team. I know the Ravens had their chance to win that game, but they won that game. And then, yeah, they couldn't get past the Chiefs. And I think what they need to do is get past them. And I don't know what that's going to take because Josh Allen, it hasn't really been his fault. You could argue maybe they need better weapons or whatever. They just need to find a way to win against the Chiefs, or maybe they get lucky enough and not even have to play them at all if someone else knocks them out. But um, yeah, I mean, the Bills are a team that, it's not like, well, if this thing goes right, then they'll make a run. I think they'll make a run. I think they will. It's just, can you get past this team that has been your demon for the last 5 years? And until you do, I can't take you fully seriously.
Yeah, I mean, bouncing off of that, because you're saying the Chiefs are the X factor, they're the monkey on their back, the whole bit. Like, I just, I'm looking at the box scores from their past four losses to the Chiefs in the playoffs, and it kind of perfectly goes to what my X factor is, which is I'll just say my X factor is their defense this year. And I'm looking at these scores. They have been a defensive team. That's Sean McDermott's whole thing. He's a defensive guy, and he had Superman at quarterback. And then they get to playoffs, and usually they'd perform well against another team, and then they'd run into the Chiefs. And in their four losses to the Chiefs in playoffs, they gave up 38 points, 42 points, 27 points, and 32 points. That's not good defense. And so I think it's one of those things like, and in these games, their offense put up 24, 36, 24, 29. That's not bad offense either.
And
Like,
to be clear, these, especially the recent Chiefs, have not been like these offensive score a ton of points
mm-mm.
juggernaut type teams.
No, the Chiefs have been actually a team that have built around their defense and have let Patrick Mahomes be Superman. And, that's proven to be mostly successful for them. And so I think the Bills need to figure out how to get back to kind of what their identity was supposed to be, which is this just tough, like not old school football, but like a little bit like reminiscent of old school football. They've got a quarterback who would have been a all-star running back in the like it you've got to just be the tougher team. And I feel like every time they run up against the Chiefs in playoffs, or even, they got bumped by the Ravens, and it's like they got out physical. And so it's just like they are they're the great regular season team who just gets to playoffs and seems to get kind of beat up. And I don't know what that is or why that is. Um, but my X factor is going to be their defense, man. I think that they need to figure out how they can get back to being a dominant defense, because the last few years they went from being a defensive juggernaut to being more of like a opportunistic, scrappy kind of team. They may steal some turnovers, a couple good sacks here and there, but they weren't shutting people down the way that they were early in Sean McDermott's tenure there. And I think I'd like to see them get back to that. I think that'd be good for the AFC playoff picture as a whole.
Yeah, 100%. I think if the and I think if you know the Buffalo defense doesn't improve this year and they get bounced in the playoffs by the Chiefs again or the Ravens again, I think that there could be this could be a surprise team for changes incoming at the top of the team here. You say
100%.
Sean McDermott's a defensive guy. If it's now year four, we're talking about the defense not performing up to snuff. It's time to take a look. And so, this is sort of a team that is going to have a very much more important season than I think a lot of us maybe thought than at the beginning of last year or the end of last year. But so they're certainly tired of coming in second place to the Chiefs. It's difficult to say they made moves this offseason that will meaningfully help them and Kansas City's reign atop the AFC. They will be relying on better play from players who are already there. They're betting on a breakout year, true breakout from Keon Coleman, and their rotational additions to the defensive line. They're relying on them to make big impacts when they do get time coming into games. There wasn't much this team needed, and it shouldn't be difficult for them to win the division, to be sure. But it's hard to feel like they've gotten better over the course of the offseason, although, 13-4, you can't really hope for much better than that. As a football fan, winning 13 games is your favorite team winning 13 games is pretty awesome. But you want to take that next step, and so time will tell if they are able to take that next step. So moving on to our next team in the AFC East, the Miami Dolphins. The 2024-2025 season, it didn't feel like make or break for head coach Mike McDaniel, but there was a feeling of like desperately hoping that the optimistic case for this team finally came to fruition. Because on paper, it works, but needlessly reckless play by their most important players sidelined most of them for at least part of the season once again, and the team's lack of depth was exposed, leading to another disappointing year. So they needed to improve their QB depth. That much was clear, as well as address the fact that two of their starting offensive linemen were free agents in this offseason. Let's talk about how they did and talk about our offseason recap for the Dolphins.
Yeah, so they absolutely went out and I think addressed their quarterback depth. This is someone who I think is a good, if not great, backup quarterback in Zach Wilson. And I think he can kind of run the system well there. So I love that signing. And then they were able to go out and get James Daniels. He's got some talent. Larry Borum, the offensive tackle. So they definitely didn't leave their positions unaddressed. Then they were able to go out and get Alexander Madison to be backup running back. They obviously had the trade for Minkah Fitzpatrick, bringing him back into the fold. And they were somehow able to convince Darren Waller, of all people, to come out of retirement. And, he's already injured. He is already on the unable to perform list right now. Maybe that's just conditioning. Who's to say? But they brought him in. They brought him in to, replace the departure from that trade where they got rid of Jalen Ramsey. They got rid of Jonnu Smith. They lost Robert Jones, and then their, star offensive lineman, Teron Armstead, retired. So it's been a busy offseason for Miami, to say the least. There's obviously all the rumors about Tyreek Hill saying that he was going to, request a trade and all that. So people thought he was going to leave. So it's been a fun offseason for them, if fun means busy.
Yeah, fun means busy. No one's more fun than the Dolphins this year. Almost nobody. We'll get to some teams in future division previews that have just been on fire. But let's move to X factors for the Dolphins. And I forgot to mention this when we were talking about X factors for the Bills, but I have given a caveat to these two guys for X factors for our division previews, which is no quarterbacks and no coaches. So if you are wondering why we're not bringing up positions like that, it's because I challenged them to do other ones. So let's talk about X factors for the Dolphins, and let's start back again with Drew.
Yeah, for me, the X factor for this team has to be the offensive line. They have not been great recently, and then they lost Teron Armstead to retirement, who I think was their best offensive lineman, playing
Easily.
left tackle. So, Tua Tagovailoa, he is a perfectly fine quarterback when he's on the field. However, he has become the poster boy for quarterback injuries. And honestly, I worry about him, but that's besides the point. A big part of staying on the field is being protected by your offensive line. And there's a lot of weapons to like on this team. You like the wide receiving duo of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. You like Devon Achane as a running back. And you like a lot of the pieces on defense. What I'm not thrilled about is who I see on the offensive line. Second-year tackle Patrick Paul is now slated to take over that starting left tackle job at the moment. And he just wasn't great last year. And it's going to be a big leap up if they're going to be successful. And if Tua doesn't have time to throw the ball, if he's getting smackdown and missing time. I mean, who's is Zach Wilson's their backup quarterback right now? Um, we've seen what Zach Wilson does, and if Tua doesn't get offensive line protection and gets hurt, Zach Wilson with a bad offensive line is not going to give you much. And so, yeah, it's a big reason why I don't feel great about this team is because I don't trust their offensive line very much. But if they come through, then I think that's a big difference maker between this team being bad and being a potential playoff team.
Yeah, 100% I agree. I kind of like honorable mentioned the offensive line for my X factor because Tron Armstead, for people who aren't like super in on, again, football knowledge, they know the ins and outs of offensive lines, is like one of those dudes. Like he's probably like a top 5 left tackle of the last 10 years. He's awesome. So trying to fill the shoes left behind by a guy like that is going to be tough. But for my X factor, I've just got to say it's how they play in cold weather and against good team. Like this is a team that is so easy to like point out what the issue is. I feel like it's like a lot of teams you're kind of like guessing. You're like, it could be this, it could be. The Dolphins are super easy. Their win percentage against teams above 500 and in cold weather are abysmal. Outside of that, they dominate. This is a great team. They are faster than you. They play quicker than you. They've got a creative coach. They've got all these things, and yet the cold weather comes and they slow down. They can't perform. Or a team that's actually good comes and all of a sudden this team has no ability to execute. And so I don't even know if it's like positional issues per se. It could be positional. It's just it's truly unique the position they're in that weather and a winning team seems to be their kryptonite. Like it's bizarre, but if they can figure some of that out, I guess good for them, but it just seems like truly that's their kryptonite. And they play in a
It's it,
cold division, man.
yeah, I was gonna say it's interesting because they're Miami, South Beach, warm weather, and their division opponents play in New Jersey, in Massachusetts, and upstate New York
Yeah,
in outdoor stadiums.
yeah,
You would think maybe that would give them a little more practice at it, but yeah, it's a tough draw.
yeah.
Yeah, so for the Dolphins, one thing I wanted to ask is, you lose Jalen Ramsey on defense, you gain Minka Fitzpatrick. Did the defense get better by that, or did it get a little worse? Like I don't know what to think of that swap there. Like, what do they have going on at corner, and why do they feel comfortable getting rid of Jalen Ramsey? And does Minka Fitzpatrick bring enough to the safety room to sort of make that secondary take another step here?
In my honest opinion, I think they got worse from this trade. Um, Pretty flatly at this point. Jalen Ramsey and Minka Fitzpatrick are both at similar spots in their career where they are former All Pros, former Ball Hawks who have each lost a step. The difference being Minka Fitzpatrick is a smaller statured guy who plays a position where you have to cover the entirety of the field. Um, and so I think losing a step as a safety is almost more of a nail in the coffin than losing a step at corner. Especially for a guy like Jalen Ramsey, who is so tall and long, he can kind of press on a receiver and still make it tough for them to hit their spots. A lot of plays, I watched a whole breakdown on this after the trade went down. A lot of plays that Minka Fitzpatrick had last year were guys just kind of running away from him. He can be in a great spot, but if a guy catches the ball and just runs away from you and is faster, there's usually not a ton you can do. And as a safety, that's a really bad spot to be in because you've got to be that last line of defense. You got to be pretty fast. So I personally think the Dolphins got worse here because I would take Jalen Ramsey over Minka Fitzpatrick at this point. On top of that, you also give up Jonnu Smith, who was a very effective and good pass catcher for you last year. Maybe they're trying to shed salary cap so they can make some different moves. Maybe they just wanted to acquire, the pick swaps or whatever. But I didn't love the move from their perspective, personally.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I know ball to that level. I'm more of a fantasy football minded person, so it's, like the defensive players I don't always know as well. I do know that on the depth chart right now, they've got a starting cornerback whose name is Storm Duck. And I gotta say, he's either going to be the best or the worst corner in the league. Um,
He was pretty solid
but
last year, I can't lie.
I'm gonna say that I don't think this trade helped, but I think what's gonna help their defense is the return of Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips. Bradley Chubb missed all of last year. Jalen Phillips only played in 4 games last year. So those should be, the two sides, the outside linebackers, rushing the quarterback and all that. So if they can stay on the field, those are two guys that I have a lot of trust in. Bradley Chubb obviously played on the Broncos for years. Jalen Phillips played Little League Baseball with my younger brother, so there's connections to both these guys. But I think that'll have a bigger impact on their defense as a whole than swapping out Jalen Ramsey for Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, definitely wanted to touch on the defense a little bit before we left the Dolphins, so appreciate those thoughts. Storm Duck sounds like that's like a DuckTales reject name. Like they're like, nah, we can come up with something better than that. Like we'll figure something else out. So shout out to him, man. That's an awesome name. So unlike last season for the Dolphins, this season does feel like it's time to show up or ship out for the McDaniel administration in Miami. While the coach himself, can hardly be to blame for poor injury luck and lack of depth at, these things have been the main contributors to the disappointing seasons we've seen lately. If this team does not succeed in making the playoffs this year, it feels like he will be the one to take the fall. And so, unfortunately for him, outside of the quarterback position, none of the Dolphins' depth problems have been shown to have been solved yet, and they've created new problems for themselves in the secondary with the departure of Jalen Ramsey. So it'll be a long climb to compete in an AFC that projects to be very competitive this season. And so we will see how if the positive case works out for the offense, this team can be competitive in this division, I think. But it'll just depend on what ends up happening, and it will have to be something different than the last 2 years, because the last 2 years it just hasn't been good enough. And speaking of not good enough, let's move to the back half of this division and start with the New York Jets. So the 2024 season was, to put it lightly, unkind to the New York Jets, because it was a season that happened in real life, which is pretty much the criteria for if a season is going to go bad for the Jets. Is it just has to be a real season that happens, because it seems to happen every year. The roster that promised to resurrect the long dormant franchise was finally at something of full strength. And the season quickly went off the rails. Their head coach, Robert Saleh, was fired. And despite trading for Davante Adams midseason, the Jets floundered from there. Their one hallmark, which was their solid defense, crumbled after losing Robert Saleh as their leader. And the offense was putrid under Aaron Rodgers, the last year of his tenure over there in New York. So lots of, big name departures and gaps to fill for the Jets this offseason. So let's talk about how they filled them and go to our offseason recap.
Yeah, so guys they added this year, obviously some of the bigger name, they brought in Justin Fields to potentially be a replacement at quarterback. And then they brought in some solid depth pieces. They got guys like Josh Reynolds, who I love, ex-Ram, the corner Brandon Stevens, Jamian Sherwood, and then obviously they got their new coach, man, Aaron Glenn. And then as far as guys leaving, Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, and C.J. Mosley retired. But basically, they just lost all of Aaron Rodgers and his whole posse. They all kind of dipped out. So all the weirdness with Randall Cobb and, what's his name, the other receiver, the tall guy. Um, they all they all left town, so they're free of the.
Valdez Scantling or whatever.
There was like a group of dudes who, because Valdez
Hmm.
Scantling, I think, played for the Saints last year, but there's just always like a group of dudes who followed Rodgers around. So they're rid of that, and yeah, it's an interesting little off season for the Jets.
Yeah, and do want to mention, as we record this, Justin Fields suffered some sort of injury in the first couple of days of training camp. Unknown how serious it is at this point when we're talking, but it's something to do with the leg or the foot. So either of those things could be something very serious, or it could just keep him sidelined for a couple of weeks. We don't know yet.
Yeah,
But if that does turn out to be serious, I mean, this is just it's unbelievable, the kind of bad luck that this team has when they start bringing in guys that they want to contribute. But did want to mention that before we moved on to X Factors. So let us do move on to X Factors. And so what do we have for the Jets this year as far as what's going to be the main drivers for this team to be successful?
the name I was thinking of was Alan Lazard.
Oh, Alan Lazard was the other receiver.
Me
Yes.
too. I mixed him up with
Hmm.
Valdez Scantling. Yeah, so the Jets are, you know, for most of our lives, they have been kind of a laughingstock team of football. Them, the Browns, the Lions have had their moments. Um, the Jets have the longest active playoff drought. They have all sorts of problems. In the last couple of years, it coincided with the absolute media circus that Aaron Rodgers brings. So it was just a recipe for disaster. I don't know who thought that would work out. Certainly I didn't, but I guess maybe the people who watch Hard Knocks or something could sell themselves on it. But um, I'm assuming Justin Fields can play this year for all of this. My
Yeah.
X factor is competency. They have a new head coach. They have a new quarterback. We like Justin Fields, even if he hasn't, even if he hasn't shown like that super high end ability on a consistent basis. I believe in him. I like him. I think Brees Hall is one of the better running backs in football. I think Garrett Wilson is one of the better wide receiver ones in football. So there's reasons to like this team, but they have just been so mismanaged in such a toxic environment for so long. They got the stink of Aaron Rodgers out of there. Can they just be competent? I don't think anyone expects this to be a playoff team this year. I certainly don't, but I'd love to see them not just be a joke of a franchise and maybe win 6, 7, 8 games and be kind of looking in the right direction. That would be a successful season to me. Um, it's a low bar, but can you not be an absolute joke? Can you give this fan base a little bit of hope? Um, I don't know if Justin Fields is the answer long term because I think he's just on like a 1 year kind of deal. I don't know what their quarterback answer for the future will be, but I would just love to see some kind of forward progress from this team.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it just seems like every time they've built up a good roster of players, they find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. I felt that way with Aaron Rodgers. It felt like they had a lot of young talent, get rid of Zach Wilson, and then they decided to go with Rodgers. It's just bizarre. But I will say, I think the re-signings of Garrett Wilson and Sauce before they even hit free agency shows at least like a good change in the vibes. I don't know that after the last few years. I mean, Garrett Wilson was clearly in the talks to be a potential trade, um, and he wasn't super stoked on being there. So the fact that Aaron Glenn has come in and has kind of changed the culture to me is at least a step in the right direction. That their young guys want to commit. But my X factor is going to be this defense. They lost C.J. Mosley, who I believe was kind of like the leader of the defense, whether or not he had taken a step back, whatever. They lose their guy. He was the green dot. He was the quarterback of the defense. They lose him, and throughout all of their tenure with Robert Saleh, the one thing that they were was a really good defense, and it kept them not good, but at least competitive in most games, where it wasn't just these like shellackings they've had the last year or so. Um, I would love to see them get back to that kind of performance. I mean, they have really good players. They've invested a lot in that front seven. Um, so I think their X factor this year's got to be that defense. And we'll see. I mean, Sauce got paid. I think it's time for him to prove that he was worth that extension. Because outside of his rookie season, he's mostly been just kind of a name brand. He hasn't
He
been
has his
that
own
dominant.
flavor at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Exactly. Been a lot of publicity. It's been a lot of show. He's in New York, but the stats and the numbers don't really back it up as him being this all pro, all talented, all world guy. So I'd love for him to step up and back it up. He got paid, so now's the time.
Yep, there's something to be said for locking up your yeah, like someone you think is going to be a defensive superstar and then someone who is an offensive superstar. There's something to be said for what that can do for a fan base over the course of an offseason that might have been embattled. And so they definitely took care of that. I think, if you're a team, I wish you could do like in baseball where you can like draft high schoolers. If a high schooler commits to like LSU or Ohio State, you should be able to draft him and be like, if a wide receiver like commits to OSU or LSU, you should be able to say, we want him. I'm drafting him because he's going to come out of there and be like be potential for a top 10 guy. It seems like the top 10 wide receiver list is just filled with guys from just the two schools, Garrett Wilson being one of them. And so, yeah, definitely. This is a point where the Jets' mettle will be tested this season. In trying to come back from taking like such a massive L over the last couple of years, their strategy was recalibrated. They didn't make too many splashy moves this offseason as far as free agent acquisitions are concerned. They focused on retaining their key contributors, like we talked about. So we'll see if the absence of locker room distractions is enough to catapult this team to competitiveness again. They may not be competitive this year, but I think Drew made a good point. It's not necessarily what they're looking for. They're just looking to make moves in the right direction, which is the opposite of what's gone on the last couple of years. They continue to make moves backward when the hope was that they would not. And so having the spotlight off of them in that way, as much as a New York team can have the spotlight off of them, New York media is its own frenzy, but as far as national media is concerned, I feel like attention may start moving away from them as the season goes on, and maybe that'll be a good thing. And it might be just what they need to stay on track here. So last team in this division we're going to talk about today is, of course, the New England Patriots. They finished last in this division, and another team that fired their head coach. The New England Patriots, they have a new coach this year as well. They are a franchise desperately searching for a life raft. They spent the last couple of seasons drowning in the gaping ocean left empty after the departure of Bill Belichick and the good ship, the SS Patriot Way. It has gone. That era is over, and nothing exemplifies that more than the fact that this team won 4 games last year. And so last season, it was as big a mess as a team can be. Offense that was at times impossible to watch, and a defense that, while solid overall, was undisciplined and inconsistent. And so they've taken some steps to correct those things. What steps were they? Let's go into our offseason recap for the Patriots.
Yeah, I mean, there's the speculations out there with the whole coaching thing. They lose Bill Belichick, they lose the Patriot way, then they hire Gerard Mayo, and he's ex-Patriot, Belichick defensive guy, and they fire him after a year, eventually landing on Mike Vrabel, an ex-Patriot, an ex-Patriots way kind of guy. So it's how much did the Patriot way leave? Who's to say? But yeah, as far as their offseason this year goes, some solid names are on this list. I mean, they go out, they bring in Stefon Diggs, they try and address the wide receiver one position. They desperately needed it. Drake May needs someone who's going to go out and catch the ball. we'll see, how he does there, but cold weather clearly not an issue for him, as he has been on the Vikings and the Bills. You know, obviously Texans, but Vikings and Bills being on your the majority of your career, cold weather's not going to be an issue. Um, they go out and sign Carlton Davis. I'd argue a very underrated corner. They get Harold Landry, the outside linebacker, Milton Williams, the D tackle, obviously, Mike Vrabel. And then really all they're losing, they lost Jacoby Brissett, but they don't really need to be spending too much money on a backup quarterback. Drake Maye looks legit. And then they lost Jonathan Jones, and then a couple of defensive linemen who are pretty much throwaway guys at this point. Daniel Ekwale and Dietrich Wise. Probably not starting defensive linemen anywhere in this league. So it's not been the loudest offseason for the Patriots, but I think they definitely tried to address their biggest glaring needs.
Right on. So let's move to X factors for the Patriots now, and let's talk about what is going to drive this Patriots team to take the next step forward.
Yeah, the Patriots that we grew up knowing are gone. I know Mike Vrabel is a name that was associated with this team, and now he's back as the head coach. I feel like he's different though. He's a different vibe. He's more charismatic. He has more riz for the kids out there than Bill Belichick did, than Gerard Mayo did. I like their offseason. It wasn't the flashiest, it wasn't the splashiest, but I think it fit kind of the direction they needed to go. I like their draft. I liked Will Campbell at left tackle out of the draft, and but for me, the X factor is Stefon Diggs. He is probably their most name recognition addition of the offseason. Um, and really, my question is, can he still be a productive number one receiver in this league? He's
Yeah.
32 now. He's on his third team in 3 years. He had a messy breakup with the Bills a couple years ago. He had a messy breakup with the Vikings a couple years before that. So he comes with his own drama. There was already some kind of pop culture related drama with him in the offseason. Uh, he's just that type of player. But can he still go out there, catch the ball, run his routes, beat his defender? That's what Drake May needs, and that's what the Patriots need, I think, in order to have some success this year. Again, I like a lot of the guys they added. I like Drake May a lot. The limited sample size that we saw of him, I liked it a lot more than their last highly drafted quarterback, Mac Jones, by a lot. Um, I like a lot of the skill position guys they have. I like the guys they brought in, but I still think there's a ways to go for this team. But I think Stefon Diggs can stretch their ceiling a little bit.
Yep, I agree with that for sure. If the positive case works out for Stephon Diggs, I think he does. He is a ceiling raiser still at that position, and certainly with a quarterback as young as Drake May, who's looking to take another step himself, just in his personal development, like as a quarterback, not to say nothing of what he might help the team do. I think that having someone like Diggs who's performing at a level that we know he can, that helps a young quarterback out so much when it comes to that. So yeah, agree there. So Matt, what do you got for X Factor for the Patriots?
Yeah, we kind of it's the same thing, different font, right? Like we both said it. Drake May needs pass catchers, and you went with Stefon Diggs. I'm going with one of the guys they drafted here, Trevion Henderson. He is one of the running. He's a running back, so not a true receiver here, but he was one of, in my opinion, the top two or three most exciting players in the draft, and mostly due to the fact that it's what he can do with the ball in his hands, both as a pass catcher and a runner. But they used him a lot at wide receiver, even at Ohio State. And they would line him up out wide and just let him cook. And he's legit. Like, I think his playmaking ability absolutely plays at this level. And if they find a way to get, that working for Drake May and this offense, um, I think we're going to see a lot of pressure taken off of Drake May because he's going to have a guy who can hit a home run from pretty much anywhere on the field and can do it. They could hand the ball off and it's a home run. They could put him out wide and have him run a route and it could be a home run. Screenplay, home run. Like, it's having those types of playmakers just changes everything. And last year, their run game was so just sluggish. And, it was a very like, we're going to run the ball for 3.2 yards per carry and we're going to tough it out. And it's like, nah, this guy may take one ball 80 yards to open a game. And so I think that type of playmaking is going to go a long way for them.
Yeah, and you think you look around, we've talked about every other team in this division so far, and you take a look around and um, you think that there might be some opportunity to exploit some of these secondaries and some of these second levels of some of these teams. And so you add someone like that who is a catch and run guy from the backfield or who can get into the intermediate area and get into that second level and do some work on a route. That's a good guy to target, I think, in this division. So one of the only bright spots for the Patriots in the latter part of last year was that Drake May showed signs that he could be the answer at quarterback, at least in the short term, if not the long term. So the Patriots operated this offseason as though that is truth, and they added pieces around him and on defense to set their young QB up for success. They also brought in a steady head coach with, like we mentioned, that Belichick-esque demeanor to try to lead this team of young players. They will need to play much better than last year to have a prayer in this division in the AFC, but it's hard to see a world where they don't improve at least a little on last year's performance. When you win 4 games, there really is the only way to go really is up from there. So let's talk about and finish our episode this week for talk about the 2025 division standings prediction. So let's talk about how we think this division will shake out, and then let's start with Drew when we do that, and talk about how you think this division will finish.
Yeah, I think it'll be similar to past years. I think there was going to be one team from this division that makes the playoffs. I think it's going to be the Bills. I think they'll have one of the better records in the AFC. I think they'll feast on the other teams in this division, and they're a good enough team to win a lot of their games. So I think they'll win the division, and I maybe a surprise, but I think I have the Patriots leapfrogging the Jets and the Dolphins. I think their team is improved enough, and I believe in Drake May enough that they can get second place in this division, maybe right around 500. Um, and then I have the Dolphins in third place. I have them kind of close to the Patriots. It could kind of go either way, second or third. But I don't like the vibes over there as well. I think they're kind of trending in an opposite direction uh, than the Patriots. And maybe I'll get proven wrong, and maybe Mike McDaniel gets a long leash and has a very successful year. But I just kind of don't see it with the Dolphins. And then last it's got to be the Jets. Despite ridding themselves of some toxic energy, even a fully healthy Justin Fields, I don't think is going to be able to take this team anywhere super successful. And now with the injury news, and we don't know exactly the extent of it, but if he's out for any significant time, their chances are straight to the shitter. So I think the Jets will finish in last place in this division.
Yeah, this may be the first time. We'll see if it's the only time me and Drew have the exact same reasons and the exact same records. Like, I've got Bills, Patriots, Dolphins, Jets. For all the reasons he said. I mean, the Bills are clearly the best team in this division. Barring a catastrophic injury, nothing's changing there. Um, I I like the Patriots offseason. I don't like the Patriots as a franchise, but I gotta respect this offseason. I think they kind of nailed it, especially with their draft added into it. I think they did a fantastic job. Um, the Dolphins, yeah, it feels toxic over there. It doesn't feel great. and they continue to prove over the last few years they can't win in the cold and they can't win against good teams. So until they change one of those narratives, I don't see them improving much. And they were built on speed and they just keep getting older, which isn't great for a team built on speed. And then the Jets, I really like the Jets offseason. I just don't know if it's enough to make them competitive yet. But I think they have pieces in place for the future that could be good. But this year, I just don't see it resulting in many wins, personally.
All right, well, there you have it. That's how we have the division shaking out. We are a unified front here. Bills, Patriots, Dolphins, Jets. That's the order. So, and that is going to close the book on our division preview for the AFC East. Hit the comments and let us know your thoughts on this division. How do you think it's going to finish? We'd love to hear from you. So, look, training camp has begun. This week, as we record, was the first week of training camp. It's all good. The press conference clips are rolling in on YouTube. I'm watching them. I'm loving checking out all my guys talking and speaking on what's going on in training camp. It's been fun. And so we're definitely looking forward to getting more and more involved as the season goes on. But our division previews will continue next week, and we'll stick in the East, but we'll go to the NFC. So we'll talk about the NFC East next week, a division that is going to be full of, at least, if nothing else, some names that we all know and love. And
You'll
so,
see them on TV.
yeah, and you'll see them.
Well,
And you'll see him. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll continue that next week. But for now, thank you for watching. Make sure you subscribe and follow us on Instagram. You can like this video, share it around, spread the love. We appreciate all the love and support that y'all give to us. So thanks for listening. And until our next episode, take care. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.